This is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com.
And this is James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com. Welcome to another edition of The New World Next Week. We're going to get right into it with the first story we're going to cover this week is more change you should not and cannot believe in. Sources say Obama to add 34,000 to the afghanisurge. This coming from CBS News, where they note that after weeks of meetings with top-ranking officials, CBS News, and I believe they're the source on this report, has learned that President Obama is expected to send a substantial amount of additional troops to Afghanistan. Sources tell CBS News that President Obama plans to completely, or almost completely, fill General Stanley McChrystal's request for 40,000 new combat troops in Afghanistan. The U.S. would have a total force of more than 100,000 there by the end of 2010, and a large force would remain there long term. We have a few subsequent links here where we go to the Telegraph and also the InfoWars for just more examples and more proof of change you can't believe in. And so much of this, I believe, comes with left cover. And that's how Obama is able to continue this agenda that folks mistakenly thought was going to change. Along with this post on MediaMonarchy.com, we have a few supplemental updates that I think still help flesh out exactly what we're seeing. Pentagon pouring your money into Afghanistan. Are they prepping for a very long war? This is an excellent and lengthy report from alternate.org. And even some updates from this morning. Rising military expenditure, the coming U.S. budget attack. That's from globalresearch.ca. Afghanistan's oil binge, 22 gallons of fuel per soldier per day. And we would definitely say that if you're serious about helping the environment, the war machine is the #1 offender. The last couple notes, of course, on Blackwater, or ZXE, the mercenary group that wouldn't go away. Jeremy Scahill still doing great work exposing Blackwater. He literally wrote the book on Blackwater, asking the question, why is Obama still funding Blackwater? And we also note that Blackwater has used child prostitutes in Iraq. These are all damning and disturbing stories, James.
They certainly are, and it's just, as we say, more change you can't believe in. And speaking of which, I don't know if you can feel it in the air over here, but the Nobel Peace Prize laureate and media-appointed president of the world himself, Barack Hussein Obama is going to be visiting Japan tomorrow for a brief stop before he goes to an Asian summit in Singapore. And he was specifically invited by the mayors of both Hiroshima and Nagasaki to visit their cities and, of course, visit the A-bomb memorials. But more change you can't believe in. The Peace Prize winner and president of Hope and Change decided that, he can't quite fit it into his schedule to come and visit. So just as a programming note, I will be visiting Hiroshima tomorrow to interview the president of the Hiroshima Peace Institute. And we'll be talking about Obama and change and peace and the long-term prospects for peace and what real and lasting peace really means. So definitely keep an eye out on the Corbett Report channel for more reporting on that. But let's move on to our second story, which I understand has to do with the economic apocalypse.
The new financial world order is still being set up day by day before our very eyes, and CNBC has had quite the parade of basically, mainline economists who have come out and basically said that the dollar is finished, as we've heard, again, folks like Estulin or Gerald Celente or Peter Schiff or Ron Paul or many others talk about a long time ago. But this, coming by way of YouTube as well as blacklistednews.com, the dollar will get utterly destroyed and become virtually worthless, said Damon Vickers, chief investment officer of 9 Points Capital Partners. Due to the huge wage disparities between the U.S. and emerging markets like China, Vickers said that may resolve itself in some type of global currency crisis. And he said, and this 4-minute video is available for you, where he said, quote, "If the global currency crisis unfolds, then inevitably you get an alignment of global world government, a new global currency, and a new world order. So we may be moving towards that," end quote, from Damon Vickers. But that wasn't all, and we do have some more updates on MediaMonarchy.com posted under this CNBC video, A New Global Currency and a New World Order. Wouldn't you know it, we also have George Soros calling for world currency and new world architecture. The next guy that showed up on CNBC basically said that the U.S. government will be totally bankrupt in a year and a half. We note, by way of raw story, that the true U.S. unemployment rate actually stands at 17.5%. We have more strange religious overtones and undertones coming from the folks at Goldman Sachs, which we can't get into here, but it's definitely worth investigating, how they're doing God's work. And that's coming from the Times Online out of the UK. Every Friday in the U.S., pretty much for the entire year, we have had banks failing. More banks have failed this year than many, many years before. 4 banks last Friday: Georgia, Michigan, Minnesota, and Missouri. We, of course, know that gold is at a record high while the dollar is at a record low. And with the worst timing for them, but fortunately for us, new reports from Politico.com that there are 237 millionaires in Congress, as if they need anything to further plummet their approval rating. An interesting note from Washington's blog about not blaming capitalism for Wall Street's corruption and lawlessness. And the last note, an update, audio update from Dr. Ron Paul that it basically says this healthcare bill could put the final nail in the coffin of the dollar.
Well, so definitely some more disturbing stories on the economic front. And for people who are looking for more information on the new global currency idea, they might want to check out my recent interview with Daniel Estulin, who, of course, as an update to last week, we were talking about how he had released a press release talking about how the G20 finance ministers meeting in St. Andrews, Scotland, was going to be specifically discussing the death of the dollar and the possibility of dumping the dollar as a world reserve currency. The latest intel that he got apparently indicates that although the idea was raised and discussed, the Russians and Chinese would have none of it because they know that would be basically financial suicide for them, with their economies being based on the US dollar, and of course so many of their reserves being held in US dollars. They didn't want to upset the apple cart, so to speak, and bring in the New World Order. So it was really the Russians and Chinese at the G20 who were apparently the holdouts on that issue. And Estulin also in that interview talks about some of the other things that were discussed, including the going ahead with the African Union and also a population reduction scheme for Africa. So that's a key interview, and that's the only interview that Mr. Estulin will be giving on the G20 finance ministers meeting. He has not talked to any other media source, and he will not talk to any other media source, so it's only available from Corbett Report. So I urge and beg my viewers and listeners to get that out to everyone. It's a key information. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. Well, let's move right along to our final story today, which comes from foodworldorder.com.
We have a story by way of the fantastic website naturalnews.com where we ask what's really in that burger. E. coli and feces, both allowed by USDA. There are 14 billion hamburgers consumed each year in the U.S. alone. The people who eat those burgers, though, have little knowledge of what's actually in them. Current USDA regulations, for example, openly allow beef contaminated with E. coli to be repackaged, cooked, and sold as ready-to-eat hamburgers. This simple fact would shock most consumers if they knew about it. This, again, ties in, and we have more documentation from Natural News. There's a video that I posted up to my YouTube channel, and I think what this speaks to is the fact that personally, I may not be able to stop the afghanisurge, and I may not be able to change the new financial world order, but I can choose what I eat. And I think that's something that I'm trying to work on, much to, great difficulty. But it's a change that you can make in yourself, and you can be the change that you want to see in the world.
Absolutely, and it's time that people start exercising that right before we lose that right as well, because we know there's lots of legislation coming down the pike that will seek to change that basic fundamental right about what we can put in our body and what food we can grow in our gardens. So definitely people have to exercise that right now while they still have time. James Evan Pilato, it's always good to talk to you. Throw out the websites one more time.
It's MediaMonarchy.com, FoodWorldOrder.com, and CyberspaceWar.com. Thanks so much.
Thank you.